Hey, Jeremy, how's it going?
It's going great, Nick.
Good, good. Hey, thanks for joining this conversation. Today, we want to talk about SEO, search engine optimization. And I think what I'm really keen to explore with you and have a conversation about is SEO is sometimes seen as a bit of a black box, a mystery topic that just suddenly produces leads. But I think that we have some different thoughts about that and really just like to explore what are SEO leads? What are some of the tools that we can deploy to help organizations develop more leads through their organic channels? And also, I think there's something that often gets missed in the discussion around SEO, and that's just the sheer quality of the leads that come through. So really love to explore that as well. But I guess to start off with, one of the things that I like to think is that SEO produces the best quality leads for salespeople to close and convert. Why is that?
Yeah, I'm so glad that we're talking about this today. I think in the context of B2B tech, in the space that we operate in, it's really important to potentially think about SEO and maybe the baggage that comes with the terminology. People have been exposed to this. Non-marketing business leaders, they've been sold this before by
Mm,
agencies. They've
mm,
deployed some type of tactics or strategy possibly in the past and don't really understand what it is or what it's meant to do, more specifically in the context of sales and revenue. So I think if we think about SEO more so in the how do people find us?
mm,
And
mm.
if they're going to find us without us going out and finding them first, what can we do to make us more findable, to
Mm.
put a word on a label on that? And if we're thinking about how do people find us and how do people find us online, if we take that even further, how do the right people find us online?
Yeah.
And so I think to answer the question, why does SEO produce better quality leads? It's having figured out how to enable the right prospects to be searching for resolutions to pain points or issues that they have in their business or systems that they're trying to amend or fix or integrate or implement. And in that search, they have qualified themselves already
Yeah.
to want to pursue a conversation or a demo or look further into your offering. So accelerates the sales process in that way.
And the thing that I really like about it is you're producing good quality leads because, as you say, they're based on an intention to find a resolution to a business issue that someone's encountering. But it's actually scalable as well. If you think of the analog, you go to a conference, let's say, and you've got a conference booth there, and that gives prospects opportunity to come up and say, "Hey, I know that you have technology or you create solutions in this space, and this is the problem I've got, and let's have a conversation about it." And those one-on-one engagements, as we know, are valuable. But the same thing happens through SEO because a business leader has an issue, has a business problem, has a challenge, has an opportunity that they want to address, and a search engine, and let's just say Google, will tend to be the first place they go to look for an answer to that solution. But the great thing about SEO is it allows us to effectively do that at scale. A one-on-one conversation at a trade show or a conference is amazing, but SEO lets us have that same sort of conversation, but at a much larger scale. And to me, I think that's one of the best parts about it. But it does take time, doesn't it? Do you want to talk a bit more about some of the challenges or some of the pushback we sometimes get when we're talking about the time to impact from organic activities?
It's important to understand that your website is competing for attention, and that attention is already essentially commoditized in a way where every other business that you compete with online, whether direct or indirect by way of your offer, but also on the topic that you are competing for online, different websites and different types of content and different amounts of content are already searchable and findable.
Mm,
And that is ranked according to an elaborate algorithm system that is also constantly being tweaked. And there's no definitive way of moving up the ranks that is repeatable by way of a exact playbook or guidebook. It takes
There's
a
no
lot
formula
of
to follow, is there?
yeah, it takes a lot of judgment. It takes a lot of strategic insight. It takes a lot of data interpretation and decisions made based on that. But it's important to think about the compounding effect that you mentioned earlier. So, as strategies are deployed to become more increasingly findable online, or to be an authority on particular topics, or to garner more interest from people who are searching for answers to their questions, and competing and outranking those other competitors online or websites that are already ranking for those who may have more authority over longer periods,
Mm,
there is a time investment to move up. It's not immediate. And any immediate actions are probably bad actions because
yeah.
it shows that the system's been gamed. And so it needs to be happening gradually over time, that authority build. But the compounding effect that you mentioned earlier and the scalability of it is so powerful, because if a system is stuck with and continually invested in, the amount of website traffic and the amount of right prospects and therefore the amount of leads continually increases
Mm.
at a rate that is multiples of ROI on your original investment. But you're right, it takes a long-term investment to get there.
I really like the way that you've put that. And I think just the way that I translate or to play that back is if you're placing an ad on LinkedIn or on Google, you're basically competing with someone else who's also paid to have a space next to you or a space in the feed that you're on. And so there's a very much immediacy and a sort of a recency aspect. But actually, when you're committed to trying to increase your organic traffic through an SEO strategy, actually you're competing with brands that have been doing the same thing, whether knowingly or unknowingly, for 5, 10, maybe even, I think we've got some examples in the tech space, 15 to 20 years. Some of the brands we work with have been around for 20 years and they've been investing in their website or in content or in other activities in various ways across that time. And so actually what you're doing is competing with brands that have made those investments over a much longer time period. And so you need to give yourself a bit of time to catch up, I think is maybe a good way to think about it. When we think about, okay, what are the ways that we can catch up? We see a lot of agencies offering SEO services that are based around what we might call on-page activities or technical SEO, making sure that your website is communicating the right signals to the search engines, as well as backlink building. But when, and I'm going to say you, but when you were developing our SEO package, you identified a gap in that approach and introduced, I guess, a third aspect to the packages that we work with and sell into our clients. Do you want to talk about how you came to that realization and what we've done that's a bit different from the mainstream offerings that we see out there?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Nick. And thanks for the kind words. I think our approach to these services was really validated by a couple of algorithm updates that Google made just back end of 2022 and early in 2023. And that's really around content. And Google calls it helpful content. And our services with tech businesses revolves around the technical components, the user experience and site speed, the on page, the authority building, dovetailing into digital PR type activities. That's all par for the course when it comes to SEO services. But because we come from a content marketing background, and applying our thought process around helpful content, but thinking about it in the context of what are people searching for, what we call search intent led content, developing out and scaling up content to a website that is entirely targeting what people are searching for, how they are asking about their issues, problems they're looking to resolve, as well as additional content that sits within a associated cluster of content. We call it topical clusters or
Mm.
content clusters to build the authority of your website and therefore your brand, on those particular topics. If we think about what's important to a business, it's selling more, consumption of their services, or increasing their products. And so if we look at that in terms of online content distribution, we need to think of keywords as business priorities and what's most important to you. And I want to talk to you, I want to put this back to you in a moment because you've led some award winning campaigns that have tackled this, but it's been in the context where our clients are competing with multinationals who've been in this space, as you just mentioned, 10, 15 years and have so much more authority. And we've been able to cut through with that. Let's go back to that in a moment. But as we target these business priorities using keywords and clusters around that, what we found is that the content has just accelerated the performance of the business online in terms of, in the first instance, even being found.
Yeah.
And then secondly, attracting the right click-throughs from audiences who are searching. And then thirdly, somehow then converting them on the website, whether it's registration of some form of interest or intent, so that they can be handed over to SDRs to be qualified further and then ultimately converted to demos and meetings. So that helpful content component has been really rewarding for us to launch, but more so for our clients who've taken up these services, who recognize that to be an authority, we need the right content
Mm.
and the right volumes of content to do.
And I really like the way you talk about and this might not be the right way to describe it, but like the duality of the keywords. So there are keywords that we know we want to target initially the reason we do that is because we believe that represents an intent and we want to bring people that are interested in understanding more about a solution in that space to our website where we can continue the conversation with them. But from those keywords, then obviously we start to look at the longer tail and develop content that targets those. But there's also a feedback loop, the other side of the coin, which is not only are we using those keywords as a signal to the market of the solutions that we offer and the problems that we can help solve or the business challenges that we can resolve, but we're also using that as a way to have a communication with an audience and understand from the keywords that selected or clicked on, that's feedback from the audience saying, actually, if there was a solution that did this, or this is a question that I have that I need to resolve, that lets us then definitely improve and enhance the content that we publish and the conversations we have either digitally or in real life with the sales teams, but also feed into, in some instances, the product development process to say, look, users of X vendor software really love this functionality, but they're actually looking to do something else, address a different problem or drive some efficiencies or whatever it may be from that software. Is there something we can do to improve our solution offering to actually start to meet and address that need? So it's a really good two-way conversation or a dual carriageway conversation that we see happening through the information that we're getting from the keyword terms that are selected.
Yeah. And alongside that, also, we spend so much time helping businesses take new products and services to market. And what we found is that as we are in the strategy conversations around key messaging and positioning and cutting through into crowded marketplaces, the sooner we're involved in taking this search intent lens to it,
Mm.
means that we're also able to help shape the thinking of the business leaders around how are we going to talk about what it is that we do and resolve. And
Mm.
it's really interesting, and you're in this conversation a lot more than I am, but the conversation shifts from we want to do this to how are people looking for this already? And
Yeah.
how can we talk about ourselves in a way that can be found in the context of what people are already searching for? Would you agree?
Yeah, and I think one of the conversations that I love having is how do we start to move from a transactional marketing approach, campaign by campaign, to actually looking at a systemic investment even just in a baseline of SEO activity, because it's going to be delivering those good quality leads. It's going to be informing the type of content that you publish. It's going to be actually giving you insight to be able to run campaigns. To me, the SEO should be the foundation of your demand generation. And then the campaigns, whether they be funded by yourself or funded by a vendor, in many instances we see with our clients, can really be informed from the insight that you get from your organic activity. To give you a great example, we've got a client that is completing in the technology space. One of the common search terms that we see coming up, or one of the common kind of keyword terms that we see coming up, comparison, solution A compared to solution B. And so we can take that insight from out of that organic activity, and then with the vendor partner, create a campaign that specifically talks about, okay, vendor versus vendor B, vendor versus vendor C, and then maybe a slightly off-center solution, but that's actually something that people are searching for. And so we're able to then use that insight to create campaigns, those standalone discrete campaigns, to actually target specific activities. And of course, once we've published the content for those campaigns, then that kind of becomes part of our ongoing organic strategy as well. So you can really layer up from that foundation, really start to layer up lots of content. We also had another really good client that we worked with that was with a vendor launching into a new space. They'd already worked with a couple of the vendors' solutions, but they were specifically launching 2 new solutions to market, and the catering to some of the challenges that their clients and prospects were having around distributed workforces and providing access to services securely and that sort of thing. And so with them, we touched on this a little bit earlier, content cluster approach. So we published 2 main pillar pages for the 2 services, the 2 new solutions that were being launched, that were exhaustive, that talked about every aspect of the solution in terms of what are the business problems that it helps to resolve, what are the benefits from taking up the solution, and why would you take up the solution from our client? What is their differentiation, as well as calls to action and some other useful and interesting data points.
Definitions and
The definitions, exactly. And then from those pillar pages, we're able to, for each of the solutions, publish up to 10 blogs that picked up specific aspects of the solution that we're talking about in the pillar page, and then created what you've referred to as this content cluster. We publish that over time, so we're sending the right messages to the search engines. Hey, we've launched a new solution. Here's the pillar page that demonstrates we have a deep expertise in understanding that solution. And then we're also able to publish this cluster content that not only broadens our authority around that solution, but enables us to target specific longer tail keywords that may be associated with the solution that people might be looking for. And as you mentioned, with that client, we then entered the program into the SEMrush Content Marketing Awards, and we were successful in winning the award for 2022 as a result of that campaign. And I think that the reason I bring that up, obviously it's great to talk about the awards that we've won, but also really to demonstrate that you can go a lot deeper with content, and it gives us the ability to create the opportunity to have multiple conversations, to attract lots of different types of problem seekers, if you like, from search engines onto our website, because we've got interesting content that's going to start to let them know that we have a great way to address the particular business challenge that they have.
there's another aspect to that particular project that I want to ask you about. When we first start working with business leaders, it's really confronting for them to start thinking about whom they're actually competing with online, because oftentimes they're competing with their own vendor partners
Yeah.
or other multinationals with deeper pockets and larger marketing teams and probably even an in-house SEO team. What did we uncover or realize as a result of this campaign that was possible with this approach?
Yeah, so I think that to talk about that aspect in particular, especially one of the new solution launches, I mean, we were competing, as you say, with the vendor, with Microsoft, with AWS, like all of the hyperscalers had a solution in that space, as well as a number of other established and emerging vendors. So it was a really crowded space. And what that meant is that when we first published the content, we were way back in terms of the search rankings. To get onto the front page, you're competing with, as you say, vendors that are either got their own SEO teams or their own content teams that are just pumping stuff out the whole time, especially actually the vendor that our client work with, who have a great approach to their content marketing and are really investing in that space. But as you say, what we found with the content cluster approach, as well as other activities that we were doing, we were publishing video content, there was some ad campaigns going. So there was a broad range of activities going. But I think really because of at the heart of that was this content cluster approach. And that allowed us to get, I think the top ranking we had was 3 or 4 on the first page for that particular keyword term. And we were displacing the likes of a Microsoft from that position. But that's because we weren't focused just on the primary keyword. We were looking at what are all of the ways that we can start to address the need or the demand or the problem resolution that people are searching for. Yeah, that approach worked incredibly well with that client and allowed them to go from nothing, because it was a new service launch, to within, I think it was 4 months, they were featured on the first page of
And
Google
essentially a
search.
brand new website. And
Yeah.
we'd launched all their other services in the 6 months prior to that, I think.
Yeah, exactly. They'd gone from having PDFs so they had a service page that linked to downloadable PDFs,
Oh, that's great.
which is obviously means that the information's there. You're basically making it pretty hard for a search engine to understand what you do and your ability to offer a good solution. So we'd gone through the process of migrating all of the service pages, all of the service information from PDF into dedicated pages. And we'd done some work to really put in place the right foundations again for the campaigns and for the launches. But yes, that was a great project that we worked on together.
There was an old adage. I shouldn't say old. It feels old with how fast things move in our space. But
Yep.
there was an adage at one point that content was king, and content marketing became a valuable resource to invest in and to get content out. Where that, I guess, evolved with the likes of generative AI and easy access to GPT-4 and Lambda and Palm and all the others, things really shifted from just content or marketing content to helpful content. And I think that's where from our own differentiation and being able to understand the businesses and the offerings that those businesses take to market, how do they develop helpful content in a way that is meaningful for their target audiences?
Yep.
It's just so incredibly powerful, and it's continually rewarded by search engines for being that helpful.
Yeah. And I think putting aside the way that you compose the content, and I think we've been experimenting with it to understand the space, and clearly AI is going to have a role in content creation going forward. But I think the trap is to think that content is just something that you need to publish. And especially in the technology space, what we see a lot of the time is that we get very product led content. So we have this feature and we support this many of that, and we have this speed and and so the content tends to very much focus on the capability of the solution, which has its place, but shouldn't really be the only focus of the content. Remember, what we're trying to do in all of our digital marketing activities is scale out so the sales team can have better conversations rather than the sales team having to ring every prospect or meet with every prospect. We want to be able to do some of that qualification at scale. So we're presenting better opportunities for them to close in terms of qualified leads. And so if we think about what are we trying to do at scale? We're trying to have those early conversations that a salesperson would have. What's the business challenge that you have? What vendors do you work with at the moment? What are some of the issues that you find? Is the pricing working for you in terms of the ROI or the economics? So those early investigative questions to try and understand more about whether your solution is going to be the right approach for the prospect. And so what we try and do with all of our digital marketing, but especially on the content side, is have those conversations at scale. And if we think about content as a conversation, then it can't be a one-way, here's everything that you need to know about my product. It's, what is the problem that you've got? What are some of the solutions that you've been looking for? What are the buying criteria that you're using? Is pricing important? Functionality? Is there a compliance aspect to your purchase? And so our any content that we publish, we want it to be part of a conversation. And by taking that conversational approach, it means that when a prospect comes to the website from a search, from some other means, and they interact with the content, first of all, they're recognizing that, okay, this might be a supplier that understands the pain point that I have, the problem that I have, the opportunity that I'm trying to address. And they may have a solution that starts to address those needs that I have. And I can see that they're cheaper, faster, better support, whatever other differentiation they have. I can see that there's a way that they might be able to provide that solution better than anyone else. They're all part of a conversation. It's not a one way, here's me telling you about how many megabits and gigabytes and clock speeds or whatever else. It's okay, you're recognizing that I'm looking to address a business need and you might have a solution for that. So that's where I think a lot of people go wrong. They think about content as, oh, we've just got to publish lots of content. But I think the way to phrase it is, what are the types of conversations we have? And we start off, going back to organic, we start off talking about people that are searching for a specific solution. And then we start to think about what are the other conversations that people might want to have? Are they comparing solutions? Are they looking at how does a particular solution solve their compliance need? How does a particular solution allow them to embrace new technologies to further their business transformation? How does this address my journey to cloud native, my digital transformation journey? So those are the conversations that we can, as I talked about earlier, get the understanding from the keyword terms that people are searching for, and we can start to have conversations across a broad range of topics that ultimately we want to turn into an opportunity that the sales team convert on a particular solution. But we know that there are lots of different ways that prospects can be searching for information about the solution, and they're all the conversations we want to have. Again, that's how I like to think about content. It's not content, it's conversations. And if we take that lens, then suddenly we're talking about structuring the information and the content in a completely different way.
There's something really important that you're talking about here that goes to the very nature of a business and its mission and its growth goals. When we're talking about how do we grow as a business and we start looking at auditing the various lead sources and acquisition channels, for the most part, the organic one tends to be either underinvested in or underperforming. They're running paid media, they're running paid search, they're getting those immediate sugar hits, as you call it. They're getting a lot of direct channel, direct to website visitors. Organic acquisition tends to be lower, but it's, as you said, it's not something that you can just switch on and then all of a sudden it works because of how we have to think about it. And traditionally, the market's been structured in a way, the marketing market has been structured in a way to be very specific, streamlined buckets of work. And now we're doing SEO, now we're doing content, now we're doing paid media. And agencies have developed their offerings against those. And that's become so normal that we've even needed to structure our website to speak in those terms. But the way that you were mentioning earlier around SEO being the foundation of a company's go-to-market, I think is really important, because if it's infused across the business, if it's in the core DNA of its marketing, we can start thinking about content in the way that you were just talking about, as it's not SEO activities and now content marketing. It's how are we developing ourselves out to be found by the right prospects in order to have those conversations that you're talking about.
Yeah.
And then enabling an ability to have sales or business development to take over and qualify on a one-to-one basis, or nurture or convert over time. That approach seems to be not articulated in the market in a way that makes sense to people about thinking across the breadth of this especially when you can't just apply SEO to a single service offering campaign.
Yeah.
There's some activities that you can do, but they're dependent on activities that affect the foundation, as you said. And so then the content needs to be built on top of that and be led by that.
Yeah.
And having that big picture approach starts radically impacting marketing strategy, which
Mm.
therefore impacts organizational strategy.
Yeah.
That's unusual.
Yeah.
That's sort of new frontier.
Yeah, and I think you've picked up the right term there, which is the marketing strategy. And look, we know on the B2B side that the marketing team has a role within the overall go-to-market with sales, with customer success in terms of delivering the right prospects to the sales teams for them to be able to convert into sales. Sales teams are in this space, in our experience, either on a monthly or quarterly target. That's almost always the case. And so they are, by necessity, forced to think in a shorter term time frame. Because of that, everyone wants to hit their targets, and those targets are going to be within a shorter time horizon than a strategy. And so this is where marketing has to be empathetic to the needs of the salespeople and make sure that we're addressing the requirements of the sales and that we're taking our role in that go-to-market process. But we also need to be strategic. We also need to say there are investments that we need to make that are going to go beyond just a month or beyond just a quarter or beyond just a year. That we need to be making strategic investments over the long term in order to be able to, at scale, create demand, which we can then qualify and ensure that the sales team never really needs to worry about their quarterly target or their monthly target, because they know that we've just got this pipeline of wonderfully qualified, intent-driven leads that are coming through. I know I'm talking in nirvana terms there, that's the utopia, but I think it's an important distinction. And I think it's one where, in service of sales, in service of the overall go-to-market, we need to be not behaving in the same way that the sales teams do as the marketing team. We need to be not thinking about what's my quarterly campaign. We need to be saying our marketing strategy means that we need to be creating a long-term pipeline of highly qualified intent-driven leads for the sales team to convert. And in order to achieve that, we need to be making longer term investments in our organic activities in order to deliver against that KPI. So I think it's that tension, which is completely understandable, that really drives the shorter term nature of some of the activities that we see on the marketing side. I think exacerbating that is that the vendors often don't really help themselves because, again, the vendors are providing marketing funds on the basis of the sales horizons and timelines that their sales teams are working to. And so that means that vendor funds are often released on a quarterly basis and it resets every quarter. Of course, there are some vendors that are really good at that they'll, with specific partners, make those longer term investments. But we've seen ourselves, we've had experience of ourselves of vendor partners or partners of a vendor who are strategically important to that vendor, who have won multiple awards and certifications from that vendor, but they're still every quarter having to go cap in hand to the vendor marketing team and say, we want to do this in this quarter, and these are the campaigns we want to run, and we'd like you to fund X. And that's where the vendors aren't helping themselves, I'd have to say. They need to be thinking strategically, because that's actually the needs of one part of their customer. There's the sales teams and their partners are thinking short term, thinking on a quarter to quarter basis, and are looking for promotions that are going to help them reach their target for the quarter. But the channel partner marketing teams are another stakeholder group that the vendor needs to be thinking more consciously about how they address, and their timelines will tend to be over the longer term, will tend to be more of a strategic nature. That's often where we see those tensions between the short-termism or the need to hit targets, completely understandable from the sales teams, and the longer-term strategic approach that the marketing teams have to take, and need to be empowered to be able to fight for that longer-term investment. That's not often the case.
How can this evolve?
Mm.
Vendor partner marketers or channel account managers have quarterly goals. they're sharpening their pencils every quarter around how they are going to release their MDF. What would be some good ways that they can take their approach to this new horizon where they're thinking bigger picture for their select partners or their top tier partners?
Yeah. I think that a great way to do it, a great way that I would see to do it would be to unlock that privilege as you ascend through the partner tiers. So a lot of the partners that we work with or we see in the market have got tiered programs, bronze, silver, gold, platinum, whatever it may be, diamond on the top, and you unlock discounts or benefits or marketing support or whatever it may be as you go up the partner tiers. And I would look to say the partners that are going to be thinking strategically about their go-to-market, we're going to reward them because they're going to be more successful in the long term. Therefore, they'll access a higher partner tier. Therefore, we will make strategic investments in their success over the longer term. So you're creating a dynamic where strategic thinking from the partner as a whole, not just the marketing team, from the partner as a whole, is rewarded with the ongoing investment and a guaranteed investment from the vendor in their success over the long term. To me, that creates the right dynamic between supporting across the market and actually driving those strategic behaviors, which we know are going to lead to more successful outcomes for the vendor and the partner over the mid to long term. So that would be a great place to start, I think,
Yeah.
in terms of the approach.
It's also, I think, a way to think about this is, and to speak bluntly, vendors are deeply concerned that their funds are going to be deployed in ways that are not to their benefit.
Mm, mm,
And they need the controls in place to understand how their investments in one of their partners' marketing programs is going to elicit demand and
yeah,
leads and eventual revenue that benefits their own increase in consumption or the increasing sales of widgets or whatever it is.
yeah,
And therefore, if we're thinking about it in the context of organic and that there's a foundation that needs to take place on the partner side, what would probably be best suited for this is that the partner is investing themselves
yeah,
into activities that benefit them across their brand and
mm,
have that foundation such that when they're applying for discussing MDF opportunities with their partners that are on quarterly and annual cycles, they can be a lot more definitive around
mm,
how that's going to be invested in, such that the experience that you had with those topic clusters and activities that benefited that go to market on those services, we can point back the funds were spent and were only delivered for activities that would benefit you as the vendor, but at the same time had a
mm.
contribution to the wider organic elevation of that brand at the same time.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think that's a really good point. And we were having this discussion again yesterday in terms of thinking about some new clients that we're working with, and should we start our discussions with them around campaign-based activity, or should we be looking for them to be prepared to make the investment? And I think it's really important because it sends a signal by making a investment from the partner for yourself in your own brand building, that you're serious about it, that you're making strategic investments, that you want to be increasing your opportunity in the long term. And then the vendor funding on top of that really gives you the opportunity to launch new products and services, move into new markets, end the financial year on a real high with a great promotion that brings you up to 120, 150, whatever percent of targets. But that's based on not hoping that the vendor's going to pull you over the line, but actually looking at the totality by saying, we've got this investment in our baseline foundational marketing activities, and the vendor investments are the sweet on the top, the icing on the cake, or whatever it may be, that really allows us to turbocharge our go-to-market. And I think that's a hard conversation to have because too often partners are used to the vendors funding all the activities because they've been able to do that in the past. I just think it's good to have a discussion more strategically about what is the value of investing in marketing as part of your go-to-market, and how can we really support you to make sure that you're maximizing that investment and that you're pulling all of the levers that you have at your disposal to be able to do that. Pretty much every partner we talk to has left vendor money on the table unspent because
Yeah.
they haven't built out, they haven't thought about how can we build out the capacity to be able to run our foundational marketing programs and then have the sweetener on the top. One last thing I wanted to talk about, just to kind of change gears a little bit and just to round out the discussion, is too often I think business leaders, and that might be from the marketing side, more likely on the sales side or the senior leadership side, see SEO or organic as this voodoo, which they think works, seems to take a lot of money, seems to take a lot of time, but and we don't know whether it's going to directly drive a rise of outcomes for us. Now, I think about that as, or where I think that comes from is no one really, other than the people that work at the search engines, understand the search algorithms. They are black boxes that we can't penetrate. So the industry the SEO industry or by nature is built on shifting sands. And we know that you talked earlier about algorithm updates. Search engines are liable to update their algorithms, and it can have, in some instances, quite catastrophic impacts on search rankings, on organic traffic to your website. So I think that doesn't help. But I really think that the approach that we're taking, where we're investing in, on-page technical activities, where we're investing in good quality backlinks, where we're investing in content and conversations, goes a long way to showing a clear value for the investment that a client is making in that organic, which we know from the experience that we've had with our clients will be driving an increase in organic traffic over time. But we also talk to a lot of business leaders that have really been burnt by, let's call them cowboys, who offer to build 10,000 backlinks for you, and you get this immediate rush, and then it all goes away. And it just leads to this further sense of a service offering or a marketing strategy that's a bit of a lottery and liable to be a waste of money. How do you address that? Because I think that's the big taboo around the topic. It's that it's sometimes hard for business leaders to understand what it is that we're doing and to peel away the hype, if you like, from the reality of a properly thought through organic traffic strategy. So how do you have that conversation?
The reality is that these leaders are in a situation where they want to pay for something and they want to know what they're buying and they want to know specifically what they're going to get.
Yeah.
And the way that this is all structured is there are so many variables and dependencies that it's hard to say, if you do this will happen specifically. Already that is black box for
Yeah.
people who don't
Yeah.
understand or who aren't already bought in. They haven't been on some journey already to understand that this is valuable.
Mm.
Those are hard conversations to have because they become more education related.
Yeah.
And it's difficult for education to aptly then confer or convey the value that can be derived, because you're forever going down a causal chain of you need to do this because of this, but if you're going to do that, you have to do this, and it just never ends because it's so complicated and complex and convoluted sometimes. That part of the conversation, I think, generally grinds to a halt.
Yeah.
But if there's a wider understanding, and if we can remove some of the jargon, if there's a wider understanding around there are prospects out there who can't find us right now, who we know need us, not from some egotistical, our brand is the best, from a known, we are different from our competitors. And we know that there are businesses out there who need us and need our services and would vastly benefit from engaging us.
Yeah.
How can they find us?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that alone starts a thought process around what do we need to do to be found by them. There are plenty of activities that can take place for us to go out and find them.
Yep.
We can just get a directory listing and deploy SDRs and call them all, right? And that's
Put up a billboard.
expensive. Yeah, put up a billboard, run ads. The outreach already exists. And that, I think, lends itself to a conversation where I want to be able to put up money today and I want to know how many leads I'm going to get tomorrow in an immediate sense. That's already there. But if we're thinking about how do we be found, and then how do we be found by the right people, and then how do we take them on the right journey so that we're not selling to them immediately and pounding them over the head with spec sheets and with product details, but taking them on a journey that shows that we are an authority and that we have the ability to answer their thoughts and their questions, and that we can then look to understand at what point are they ready to start having a conversation, or are they ready to start thinking about buying because they're now at a cycle within their business where they're going to depart from an existing vendor or an existing partner, or they're taking something new to market and they need a new platform, a new offering that you can provide. That all happens digitally and has so much involved in it that someone would need to be able to understand the totality of that to ultimately commit, and have the commitment be resolute and steer you through the first couple of quarters where you can see growth, but it's not immediately translating into a flood of leads as you would get from paid media. That the resoluteness and commitment to the decision once you're into the first year and beyond sees the compounding benefit over time and then reaps the rewards, but it takes a resoluteness to the commitment. So it's a hard conversation to have with people when they're thinking about how do we do something about our organic acquisition.
Yeah. I just love the way you put that. How can we be found? Prospects are asking the question anyway. So it's how do we make sure that we're part of that conversation? I think how can we be found is just a great way to finish up the conversation today. That's, I think, a wonderful takeaway. It's not about voodoo. It's just about how can we be found? SEO gives us how can we be found? All right. Thanks, Jeremy. That's been great.
Thank you so much.
Cheers.